Ole Miss versus Texas A&M. It is here this Saturday. Lane Kiffin put gasoline on the fire. We have Joey Ikes to come by to talk all about this game, and we're going to have a good time. This is going to be a lot of fun. Gasoline on the fire. Grudge match. Let's go. Let's do this.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis, and thank you very much for tuning into it. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered with the season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. So do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, and participate in the conversation by commenting below and hitting the upvote button. That would make our day. Anyway, we're going to jump right into it. All right, we're here with Joey Ikes from LockedOnAggies.com. You can see the logo on the top of the screen. We are getting ready for Ole Miss and Texas A&M. And you know what, Joey? This game just got a little bit spicier, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. You can always count on Lane to add a little bit of juice to the situation for sure.
Yeah, you would think that juice wouldn't necessarily be needed in a game like this, but then Texas A&M has struggled this season, and people are legit wondering if they can make the Liberty Bowl right now. Ole Miss is down because they lost a game at LSU. Both fan bases are just down, and you just look at views on YouTube and you're like, okay, this needs something. Well, Lane Kiffin gave us jumper cables, and for those who don't know what happened, basically DJ Durkin came up in the Wednesday teleconference, and Lane Kiffin said, hey, we wanted to keep DJ. We got outbid for him, which is something that school does, and that is in reference to what went down in the spring about NIL, that when Jimbo called Lane a clown. All of that happened and is coming from there. Joey, do you think this is bulletin board material for Texas A&M, or are they kind of too far gone at this point?
I mean, I think at this point, if A&M needs some sort of bulletin board material, they're doing a whole lot of things wrong. I mean, they're 3-4 at this point. Like you said, they're fighting for the opportunity to play in any bowl, much less playing in a New Year's Six bowl or a college football playoff like they thought they might be at the beginning of the year. So if this turns into bulletin board material, I think Jimbo's struggling a little bit more than we might even think he is at this point. Just because if you need Lane Kiffin to say something before a game that, it's their first game at home in something like 42 days, Ole Miss is obviously a really good team this year, and it lost a little bit of luster with Ole Miss losing to LSU last week. You don't have the undefeated top 10 team coming to town, but it's still a really big game. And if they needed Lane Kiffin to talk about their defensive coordinator and to talk about their boosters and stuff like that to get them revved up for the game, there's more problems in College Station than we even know at this point.
Yeah, and speaking of problems in College Station, there's some stuff that's happening there. Not necessarily good. 2 offensive linemen are injured and out for the year. 3 or 4 freshmen have been suspended indefinitely, including I think a freshman midseason All-American by PFF.
Yeah.
And there's boosters basically trying to find millions of dollars in couch cushions just to try, what are we going to do? What is going on in College Station right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that happens, with these guys that we forget a lot of times is these guys come into school when they're 18 years old or 17 years old, some of them. And I remember what I was doing when I was 17 or 18 years old, and if I was under the spotlight some of these guys are under, I don't know that I'd like for my decisions to be broadcast the way some of these are. But, yeah, they had so far there's been 3, actually suspended true freshmen that were suspended for some actions in the A&M locker room that Jimbo Fisher didn't appreciate, that apparently was handled by the team. And there was a suspension issued to a couple of players earlier in the season for the Miami game because some guys missed curfew. And when they handed down those suspensions, Jimbo Fisher took the conversation to the veteran leadership of the team and said, hey guys, what do you think we should do here? This is the scenario. How do you guys think we should handle this? And they said, you got to suspend them. You got to help them learn. Unfortunately, one of those guys was also one of the guys who was suspended this week. So one of them, it really seemed like got the message. That's Evan Stewart. He's their second best offensive player at this point. He's played really well this year. The other one, Chris Marshall, doesn't seem to have gotten the message quite so much. And he was involved in this scenario in the locker room as well. So there, like you said, there's just a lot going on in College Station right now. It's tough when most of these guys are super successful in high school because they're the best player in the state or something like that. And so they just run through their high school seasons. And then they get to college, and especially when you don't have success right away, even if you're playing a lot, which a lot of these freshmen are, if the team doesn't have success right away, a lot of times it's hard for these young guys to stay bought in and to continue to work hard throughout the process. And I think that's sort of what you're seeing right now. Some of these guys are looking around in October, and the season doesn't mean nearly as much as they thought it would when they showed up at College Station.
Yeah, there's a rumor that was going around Twitter yesterday that some of the players is actually trying to recruit current other players in good standing into the transfer portal. And that's kind of what the impetus was. Is there any truth to that?
So the suspension that was handed down, the rumor that I heard, or the report that I heard, was that there was some substances involved in the locker room that should not be consumed in the locker room, and in Texas is illegal to consume anywhere. So that was the report or the rumor that I heard. Anytime a team struggles like this, you're going to start to hear these transfer portal sort of situations, especially. A&M brought in what is considered the best recruiting class in the history of these recruiting rankings last year, and they haven't had the success on the field this year. So immediately with the open portal, everybody's going to say, oh, all these guys are going to transfer, whether that is or isn't the case. And so we have heard that there's a guy or two that are planning on sort of backing out for the rest of the year and entering the portal. But from what we've heard, at least at this point, there's not any sort of widespread exodus taking place to head to the portal and go visit the portal king in Lane Kiffin.
Yeah. So we don't have to worry about a situation where Jimbo has lost the team in any way, because
I don't think so. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, because from the outside looking in, it feels like everybody's kind of piling on at the moment, and you kind of wonder what's true and what's not true, because there's so much on everything misinformation out there. So
absolutely.
I'm just gonna,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that anytime, especially because, in the first year where NIL was a big deal in recruiting, A&M pops the best recruiting class in the history of recruiting. And so we've heard since the spring the over-exaggerations of what was going on in NIL all across the country, and a lot of that directed towards A&M because of how well A&M did on the recruiting trail this year. And so when you see that team that does that, and you have this belief or these rumors going around about what they did in order to get that recruiting class, and it gets stoked throughout the whole summer and all the press conferences and all that kind of stuff, and then they get into the year and they don't have the success, a lot of people are really eager to jump on the grave of those teams and just bury them as deep as they can. And especially because Jimbo didn't really back away from what they were able to accomplish. He didn't really, he didn't take the humble high road of, we're just excited about our guys and da-da-da-da-da. He stood up and took some shots back at some of the folks that took shots. And so anytime you see that, you're going to get these guys who are really eager to jump on the grave. And I think that's a little bit about what's going on now, is just that people are really, as kind of sad as it sounds, they're really excited to see A&M struggle in a year when a lot of A&M folks felt like it was time to take the step to 9 or 10 wins to get ready for 2023, to take the steps to 11 or 12 and maybe a college football playoff.
Why can't Jimbo get the quarterback situation right?
I think Jimbo asks his quarterbacks, and I talked about this on my show yesterday, actually, with one of my coworkers. I think Jimbo asks quarterbacks to play on hard mode. And if you look back at Jimbo's history, the best illustration of what he wants his offense to be was back at Florida State when he had Jameis Winston playing quarterback. And say what you will about what Jameis has become in the NFL. But when he went to the NFL, he was playing very high level, sophisticated quarterback. And so what Jimbo wants to do is he wants to put a ton of decision making in the hands of the quarterback after the snap. And he wants to use, traditional 3 and 5 step drops and make him read out a progression through 3 or 4 reads, find the right guy and make the throw. And when you have the guy who can do that from a process standpoint, it can work really well. But if you don't, you got to find a way to make things easier for him. And I think usually when I hear a coach talk about how we're not executing the right way, the way that I read that is we're putting a lot on our players' plates to be able to do, and they're not handling it very well. And as a fan or media member, I kind of say we need to back off of what we're asking them to do and make it easier for them to execute, as opposed to just going to the press every week and saying, we need to execute better. We need to execute better. The plays were there. We need to execute. Because if the plays are there, but they can't execute them, then they're not really there in practice. I think that's what's going on. I think Jimbo just asks a little bit too much of his quarterbacks at times, and it turns into a problem for those guys.
All right, whenever we come back, we're going to get into the game tomorrow. We're going to talk about Devon Achane. We're going to talk about the Ole Miss run defense. That's the primary key to the game. But first, I do want to tell you about my friend Jimbo. He'd hide in the office bathroom every 30 minutes to dry off his armpits so no one would see the sweat circles under his arms. He finally has his life back because of Sweat Block. Jimbo was able to fix his problem with Sweat Block. It gives you confidence to wear what you want to wear without embarrassing underarm sweat and boosters breathing down your neck. The Sweat Block wipes are featured and tested by Rachel Ray on her show by firefighters. If you or somebody you love are experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON, that's 2 words, at sweatblock.com. It's also available at Amazon. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Aggies podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including iTunes and Spotify. Do us a favor, leave a 5-star review. You can say whatever you want to say. Just leave a 5-star review. That way, whenever somebody searches Ole Miss Podcast or Texas A&M Podcast, the Locked On Aggies show or the Locked On Ole Miss show comes up, and that'll help us out in the Google machine. We appreciate that very much. I'm here with Joey Ikes. We're going to start talking about the football game finally, and there's really one key in this game, I think. Texas A&M offensively has been Devon Achane and the rest. That's kind of their identity this year. The last 3 weeks, Ole Miss has leaked on run defense, and teams have been able to take advantage of that. So this weekend, the key to the game, in my opinion, will be, will Lane Kiffin and Chris Partridge be able to duct tape that run defense up, or will Devon Achane have a big game? Because the way I see it, if Ole Miss can hold Achane to 90 to 120 yards, just a normal day, I think Ole Miss can potentially win this game. If Devon Achane goes off, Ole Miss will lose this game. That's how important this is.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that A&M has struggled with more than anything else throughout the course of the season has been building any sort of consistency on the offensive side of the ball. And so the only real consistent aspect of their offense, like you mentioned, has been Devon Achane. And just to illustrate how much he really is the entire offense, he has over twice as many total scrimmage yards as any other player on the A&M offense. The only guy within 400 yards of him is Evan Stewart, who has almost exactly 400 yards less than Devon Achane has. So it literally is Devon Achane and the rest, like you said. And he does it as a receiver. He does it as a runner. And so if he and he also does it as a kick returner, where he's one of the best in the country too. So the games where A&M is able to put up points when they happen, which isn't very often, it's from Devon Achane, who has 5 touchdowns on the season, and nobody else on the team has more than 2. So it's the Devon Achane show. And if Ole Miss continues, like you said, to have trouble stopping the run, they will just keep going to him, and they will keep using him, and he will get a ton of touches, and he will break. He's an All-American level track sprinter who there's been conversations about trying to see it or seeing if he's going to try to pursue the Olympics in track in 2024 in addition to pursuing the NFL. So he's that kind of elite speed, but he's also extremely good change of direction, very good feel in space and in confined spaces, which he's not a big back, so you'd think he'd struggle a little bit in those tight spaces, but he does really well. So you're right. It's the Devon Achane show in terms of the A&M offense because the passing game's just been abysmal for the most part.
Now, has Devon Achane, his success running the football, is it mostly outside? Is it mostly inside? How does that look?
So a lot of it is outside just because of the speed. Like he can get to the corner, and the way he can mess with defenders' angles at the edge is really remarkable. But he's also incredibly good on inside zone type runs where you have to cut back, and if the offensive line creates a crease for him, that speed and acceleration pops inside just like it pops outside. And if he gets a lot of the runs A&M runs are sort of delayed inside zone draw type plays. And if it sets up right, he has the ability to pop it, and he pops a lot of big runs up the middle. But he's extremely dangerous, really in both ways. But you'll see it pops a little bit more when it's inside, but he's very consistent to the outside.
Yeah, he's a good runner. And last year when Ole Miss beat Texas A&M, the comeback was led by Devon Achane. Mm-hmm. It was because of him that they were able to get back in that game. So there's going to be a little bit. And then you have DJ Durkin and Lane Kiffin, who each know one another's weaknesses. So Absolutely. You're going to see Ole Miss do things that DJ Durkin hates when other teams do, and you're going to see DJ Durkin do things that Lane Kiffin hates when other people do. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. Let's flip side of the ball before we get into our prediction segment and go into the third segment like that. Texas A&M's run defense has not been particularly good this year, right?
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things I was going to bring up here in just a second was it's almost the same conversation, flipped on both sides of the ball when each team has the ball, is that they haven't given up a ton of huge runs, but they've just been very consistent. They put a lot of teams in, 3rd and 2 every series or something like that, which means that's how Appalachian State beat them, is they just put them in, they were in 3rd and 2 every series and would run for 3 yards and convert and just held onto the ball forever because they were willing to take the 3 or 4 yard gain over and over and over and over again. And with the way Ole Miss has run the ball this year, it would not be shocking at all to see Mississippi Ole Miss have a lot of success running the ball downhill right at A&M. I will say A&M got their best defensive lineman, McKinley Jackson, back a couple of weeks ago against Alabama. Was his first game. And it's been a lot better on the ground since then. He's a 325-pound nose tackle who's, he is their best defensive lineman. And so having him back makes a big difference, but they've still given up way too many rushing yards per game this year. And probably will continue to do that this week against a good Ole Miss running game, for sure.
Now, part of that is A&M's defense and their roster, they are supremely talented. Lane Kiffin called them a top 5 team in the country, talent-wise, if you just look at their roster. Now, is there struggle in the run game because they are so pass defense heavy?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of – we spent 2 or 3 weeks in Aggie land talking about 3-man fronts versus 4-man fronts, and the DJ Durkin's playing the wrong front, and they're giving up all these yards on the ground because he's playing 3-man fronts and all that kind of stuff. And so I think you could argue that they're willing to give up the 3 and 4 or 5 yard run to not give up the 40-yard pass or the 20-yard pass. But in a game like this against a team for Ole Miss that is really run heavy, both in terms of attempts and yardage and production, I think we've seen them make some adjustments the last couple of weeks to get a little bit better. But I think the main struggle for this defense is that they're extremely talented, but they're extremely young. Like there's a 17-year-old who's supposed to be in high school still, who's playing a significant rotational role as a defensive end on this team, who reclassified into the 22 class to go to A&M this year. And so, he should be a senior in high school, should be one of the top players in the 2023 class, reclassed in April. His name's LT Overton. He reclassed into 2022 in like February or March and wound up at A&M in the fall. And I assumed when he signed up, he'd be sort of a red shirt, but he wanted to get on campus and he wouldn't play very much. And then he's played in every game and played meaningful snaps and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty remarkable how young they are. And I think a lot of it comes down to that is these guys don't necessarily a lot of them are still building up the college bodies to play against some of these grown men they're playing against in the tournaments.
This is kind of a joke, and I'm not talking trash at all. I'm not doing that a little bit. But I have a joke that I like to say, and I think you might get this better than most everybody else. But I say that Haynes King's throwing motion makes Tim Tebow look like Dan Marino.
Yeah, and it's rough sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, it reminds me of an old-timey baseball pitcher.
Yeah.
Him throwing the football. It's bizarre. And so my question is, in the Alabama game, you had one play to go. A timing pass with his release is going to be difficult. Why was that play called?
So what was said after the game was that was the same play that they called on a touchdown pass earlier, or on a touchdown pass earlier in the game that he threw to the other side of the concept, where he threw to the 3-man side. But that something about that read told him that he needed to go to the single side over there, Evan Stewart, and he just didn't make a good pass. I don't think it was a great play call. I think you got to have – the thing – I brought this up right after that game was that, like, if that play is your only play that you have for one play to go from the 2-yard line and get into the end zone, that's basically a 2-point conversion situation. You would assume that going into a game you'd have 2 or 3 2-yard goal line plays for 2-point conversions that you are absolutely in love with. And if that's one of them, that's a huge problem. And if they didn't have them, that might even be a bigger problem.
Well, I think the main 2-point play was already used. That was that tight end throwback play that had the wide open receiver in the end zone earlier in the game. That I think if that was their druthers, they would have used that play in that situation, but they had already used it. So
maybe
they kind of shot
absolutely.
that bullet. Yeah.
Yep, that's one of those things about you get in these games and you got to come back. So you shoot all your bullets and then you get to that last play and your clip's empty in terms of what you have left to use.
It's just such a difficult situation playing Alabama. It doesn't matter how talented you are; they just pressure you on so many different levels at all parts of the game. I mean, The coach is feeling it, the quarterback's feeling it. Heck, the slot receivers feeling it. It's just
absolutely.
It's like a boa constrictor they can go. And if you can fight that and get the win, that's the reason people celebrate it so much, because we have 15 years of seeing that now.
Yep, and, absolutely.
Yeah, you went through it last year when Zach Calzada pulled out the unthinkable. I went through it in 14 and 15. And, and Johnny Manziel, that's the reason I think people take those wins over Alabama so big, because of all the pressure they put on you on all the players. Not to mention, they're probably the most talented team on everybody's schedule. The only person that's close to them is Kirby Smart in Georgia. So, hey, congratulations for even getting to that situation to where you have that passed. And hopefully after the A&M game, after the bye week, Ole Miss can be in a similar situation as well. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what we're watching in this game, and we're going to give our predictions as well. So stick around. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Aggies podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, and, of course, participate in the conversation by commenting below and upvoting the video as well. I'm here with Joey Ikes. We are talking Ole Miss and Texas A&M. We had a little gasoline thrown on the fire yesterday when Lane Kiffin decided to be Lane Kiffin, which, once or twice a year that happens. But it's an interesting situation. Now, I tell people all the time, I'm a homer. I can look at it objectively and I have problems, but I'm a homer. So I look at this game and I think Ole Miss is going to win this game. I think Ole Miss is going to win this game because I think their run offense can take advantage of A&M's run defense. And I think they will put enough of a Band-Aid on to where Devon Achane, he has to come out of the game eventually. Ole Miss has 2 or 3 guys they can put back there. Achane is only one guy. And just those numbers is the reason I think I'm leaning Ole Miss in this game. What about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in that, and this has just become my core belief about this A&M team over the course of the season. I just don't think they can score enough to compete with good teams. And so it's just one of those things that until – and there's a little quarterback situation going on where Haynes King got hurt in the second half against South Carolina, and Connor Wigman, who everybody has wanted to see for a few weeks now. Got out there, and you talked about Haynes King's throwing motion and the way the ball looks coming out of his hand, and it was just stark how different it looked, especially because it literally happened within a series, and Haynes King rolls out and throws the ball and hurts his shoulder, and nobody wants to see a guy get hurt. And then Connor Wigman comes into the game, and it's a 2nd down and 10, so they got to throw the ball twice. And he comes out and throws 2 strikes immediately, bam, bam, and 2 back-to-back plays. Guy gets tackled short of the sticks on 3rd down, so they don't convert. But it was stark how different it looked. And so, but unless Connor Wigman comes in and winds up starting this game, and they show a bunch of different things on offense, I just don't think A&M can score. And I think, like you mentioned, Lane threw some gasoline on the fire, and we know Lane has the ability to dial some things up whenever he wants to put on a show, and he won't. He's not the kind of guy who's going to take his foot off the gas pedal whenever he wants to score a bunch of points on somebody and send a message either. So I just have a feeling A&M won't be able to score with Ole Miss, and that Ole Miss will wind up winning. Sure.
Part of it makes me think if Lane Kiffin did what he did on Wednesday, he's supremely confident. He's seen something on film.
Yeah.
To where he feels like it's going to be okay. Now, it could absolutely backfire. It's a football game. Anybody can win the game. Nobody is going to go 100% on the predictions. If I could, I would be Biff Tannen.
There you go.
Yeah. But Connor Wigman, right before we get to our predictions, Connor Wigman, he's a good little quarterback, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And it's one of those, like we mentioned earlier, Jimbo asked his quarterbacks to sort of play on hard mode. But he's been talking since camp about how good Connor has looked and how much they trusted Connor if they needed to play him. That they were trying to play the veterans because they're trying to win a lot of games this year. But they were trying to play the guys who'd been around because of the fact that the system is what it is. But they trust him, and they came out and they made a comeback on South Carolina with Connor Wigman as the quarterback, and got to another point where they had plays to throw the ball in the end zone to try to score a touchdown to win the game. Weren't able to execute, but that's a Hail Mary. That's the kind of stuff that happens. But yes, I think they have a lot of confidence in Connor Wigman, and he I think it's merited and it's granted to the confidence that they have in him. And I think that you got to have some sort of life in this offense to save this season and to save recruiting going forward. They have 0 offensive skill players or quarterbacks in their recruiting class for 2023. No running backs, no tight ends, no wide receivers, and no quarterbacks, because nobody wants to sign up to play in an offense that looks like this one looks. So they're trying to save a lot more than just a Liberty Bowl berth right now with their offense. So that's a big story for sure going into the game.
So thinking about how close is Jimbo to just playing the kids?
He's been playing the kids throughout the whole season. Like the freshmen have played a ton. Cam Dewberry, one of the offensive linemen, got his first real action against Alabama and then started against South Carolina. They played 9 true freshmen on defense in the first week of the year, and they played a ton of them throughout the year. They played a bunch of the young kids. I think that's part of why things have been so inconsistent, is these guys trying to sort of find their footing. But I don't think he's far from putting Connor Wigman in there and saying, okay, we gotta put some stuff on tape for this year, and then hope we can roll into next year with an answer at quarterback instead of questions at quarterback like you've had for a couple of years.
Yeah, and it's a situation on the other side of the field. If Ole Miss successfully runs the ball, which they have against several teams, they put up decent numbers. Let's say if they get up north of 260 yards in a game, A&M has no shot in this game.
Yep,
they will
absolutely.
keep it going. Even best case scenario for A&M would look like the Ole Miss Auburn game.
Right.
So they're going to have to stack the box to try and take away the run. They're going to have to do that. DJ Durkin, we talked about what he does and how he does it, and being really careful about the pass. Well, this is a game where he's probably not going to be careful about the pass. He's not going to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And even if they start in light boxes, these guys, the safeties that they have and the slot players that they have, they're going to have to be supremely keyed in on coming downhill for the run, which, then makes them susceptible to play action and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see what Durkin does in his first matchup with his old boss and how they sort of handle that dynamic, considering, how productive Ole Miss has been against the run or as a running team. And then what they know that their offense isn't going to just put up huge plays and score a bunch of points, even if they only have, 25 minutes of time of possession. So they're going to feel like they can't just let Ole Miss hold on to the ball and move down the field and kind of control the game like that. They're going to feel like they have to put pressure on them and really try to generate some big plays, which they've been pretty good at this year, and it's sort of saved the team's bacon a few times for sure.
Yeah, it's a good team. A&M is probably the second most talented team of players that Ole Miss is going to play. This season just hadn't really worked out for them.
Absolutely.
Joey, what is your score prediction for the game?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think it probably winds up being somewhere in the neighborhood of Ole Miss 31, A&M 24 or something like that, which 24 would be up there with A&M's highest scoring production of the season, which is telling. But I think it winds up being about a touchdown win for Ole Miss. It'll be close because it's at Kyle Field in College Station. But I think the Ole Miss offense will wind up being too much for the A&M offense to keep up with. And I think Ole Miss probably wins 31-24.
Yeah, I think that Zach Evans hopefully will be back for this game. He's a Houston kid. He's going to want to play in this game against A&M because they're right down the road. I think he's going to perform pretty well. He does really well on the outside zones, kind of like Devon Achane does as well. I think I'm looking at a 27-20 or a 34-27 type game as well. So we're kind of right there.
That feels about right. Absolutely.
All right. Joey Ikes joined us today. Thank you very much for doing that. This crossover is going to go up. Give Joey a subscribe if you're watching on the Ole Miss page, and if you're not an M fan, come over and see me as well. Absolutely. I'm a super homer, but I'm a fairly nice guy.
There you go.
But anyway, for Joey, I'm Steve. We'll see you next time.